Siege. I've moved. It's been a few years. I haven't had a lot of free time. This is my free time. I'm sharing it with you. What I want to do real quick, just as I'm getting this set up, I actually have to get this set up for some work stuff that I'm doing, and I figured, might as well get some streaming done while I'm getting it all configured. So hopefully I've got the sound working and all of that. But again, I've moved. The two dogs I had, Stan and Sasha, they've long since passed away. Walt's still around. Got another one named Mikachu. I now live in Oakdale, Minnesota, instead of St. Michael, Minnesota. Back in my old hometown. Went to St. Pete's, Hill Murray, Tartan, things like that. But what I want to do in this particular video is just do a very quick walkthrough of a mature fort, go over some of the tips. I have some old videos on getting started and stuff like that, but I kind of wanted to show a couple of the techniques that you can use in Dwarf Fortress to make managing a fortress a lot easier, and your military and things like that. So I figured the easiest way to do that is a tour. Now, I'm going to call it Idgrad's kind of stock start, but kind of picked it up over the years. The original wagon that I had came in, and I'll get the little cursor here so you can see it there on the screen. That's where the wagon was. And I just walked over and found where the center of the map was and dug down. When you first start out, I usually will dig down, straight down until I hit stone, which is this level here. And then what I tend to do is I'll put the cursor here, you hold shift, and that'll move you 11, 11, 11, and then this way 11, 11, 11. And then I added 1 for whatever reason, and then I went up 2, and I dug that out in soil. So this is kind of the original soil area that I dug out. Put a couple farms in here and put a general stockpile and get everybody inside. And this is where what I'm going to call the Idgard default start is. Then I go a ways away and I find where I want to dig down. I dig down a ramp. And that happened to be right here on the other side of the stream. Where it is isn't terribly important. I'll explain that in a minute. But you dig down with a channel, and that's your H key. Then I went down, dug, and then switched to channel again. Dug. Put a little gap here because I was trying to dodge the stream. And then went down, and this is where I dumped out. And this is what I'm, again, going to call just the Idgard default start. But after years of playing, when I first started out, this, we'll call it the Bridge of Death, was only one, I'll call them shift blocks, but it's when you hold the shift and move the mouse cursor, that's 11 spaces. I found out that 2 was the ideal length. So what I end up doing, and I'll kind of walk you through this here, is I set a dig order, and I dig out this section, roughly. Now this is where I come out, and I know I need 3 spaces for the caravan carts. So I know that I'm going up that far. I want 1 extra space here. And that extra space is for the bridge, because I want to be able to seal that room. So there's 2 bridges in total. There's this bridge of the Bridge of Death, and then there's the caravan bridge here. And if I close those 2, it completely seals the fortress. Now, when you're starting out, that first year is absolutely critical. So the number of dig operations matter. And I actually counted every little square in doing this opening, and this is the most efficient and most defensible setup that I found for new players, old players, lazy players. I'm in the lazy category now at my age, but this seems to work well. And then I channel usually 2 on one side, and then I'll channel 3 or 4 on the other side. And I'll explain that again here in a little bit, but when I start out, it's usually every other square is a stone trap, and then I'll put whatever weapons that I can muster. And then I try to limit myself to about 10 cage traps. And that's this little turnabout here. And it's usually, not always, but usually 5, and then 5. And this used to be a weapon trap. I changed it to a cage trap. And then it comes out here. And I'll kind of replay that. This room over here, which seems a little bit odd, this is for a giant cave spider that I was planning on. Of course, with my luck and the RNG hating my guts, no cave spiders, giant cave spiders ever spawned. So, but that's what that room was for. And then I could drop a bridge. That's why this is wider on the left than it is on the right. Is I still wanted a 2 gap when I lowered the drawbridge, which lowers out to here, so I can actually tell when it's down. And then there'd still be a 2 gap for them to fall. So then you just whip it around, and then you dump out here at the top, and that's where your trade depot goes. And then I beelined over to that central staircase that I was starting to dig. Now I'll explain this fortress setup here, but that initial start, dig down to hit rock, dig out your dirt, because the skill up that you get from digging out the dirt makes the rest faster anyway. I've actually clocked it if you just went straight to the tunnel, or if you dug out the clay first, or dirt or soil, whatever you have. The skill up makes it faster, so I would recommend doing that. Then, in this particular fortress setup here, and you can see my cursor there, good, I just dug straight up, and the goal was effectively to get over to this barracks box. And that's where I just put a bunch of barracks. So when you start out, you're going to dig your clay area out. And again, in the original, it's this first kind of section here. I put down the same number every time. It's 5 and 5, total of 10 plots. Seed, stockpile here, no bins. There's a weird still thing with putting bags in bins, and it's a pain in the ass, so just leave it at bags. And then I build 3 tables, 3 wood tables, and 3 wood chairs. And you're going to need that initially for what effectively is your nobles. You're going to have your expedition leader, bookkeeper, and manager. And then on the surface, I built a butcher, a leatherwork tannery, I guess is what it's called, and a carpenter. Later on, I got rid of the carpenter, and I have 2 butchers and 2 tanneries. Down when I'm digging these tunnels, I put in a whole bunch of temporary workshops for like masons, mechanisms, stone crafting, just so they don't have to haul the rock very far. And the first thing I do is I set everybody to try to start making stone blocks. The reason for doing that is when we come up here and you look at the surface, that's the wall. So as they're digging out that tunnel, the other dwarves, except for the one, we have one that's dedicated for brewing, one that's dedicated for cooking, one dedicated farmer, and then everybody else by default has stoneworking and masonry turned on, just to help churn out those blocks. And the size that you see on the screen, the number of blocks there, that size is about as big, don't count the grove to the right, we'll get to that a little bit later. That's about as big as you can make and get all the blocks done out of that one hallway dig and get it done before the first caravan comes. So that's what this whole default Idgarad start style thing I'm calling it is based off of, is get how much you can get done before the first caravan shows up. So don't worry about the surface plots, that's just gravy, I suppose. And that's where we get to. Now, after years of playing, and I'm going to zoom this out here, this is about the most efficient fortress layout I could come up with, and it's stupid easy. Stupid easy. I'm going to reproduce it for you. You'll understand how to make it, scale it. It's really easy. So we're going to come down here, and we'll reproduce it here. So this is our central staircase. This is, your surface wherever it is when you first start the game. That central staircase, which I always do 3x3s, the dig operation is really easy. I'm just going out 1 extra. If you look at the exposed rock there, it's already done for you. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now if we come back up here, you're going to notice something. if you look at this, there are only two small side hallways, two side small hallways. They're 3 by 3, 1, 2, 1, 2. It's the exact same. You can play with the layout, but what this is all built around, remember those shift blocks I told you about, those 11 by 11s? 1, 2, there's my 3 by 3 hallway. One, 2, put another 3 by 3 hallway. And then 1. We get just a little extra padding over here. That's it. And then guess what? Another 3 by 3 hallway. Wash, rinse, repeat. That's it. Lay out the whole place however you like. The key rule, and this is a 3 by 3 embark, is just to remember that you're always going to have 2 of those 3 by 3 hallways. There. That's it. It's the whole layout. There's the magic. And if you want to have a big, tavern, you just dig them out like that. That's it. You want housing? That shift block again. Bring it on down. You can just delete every other, delete every other row. However you want. And then just run a little 3 by 3 hallway down the middle. That's it. That's the whole setup. And the reason I like this is it's the most efficient for getting all the materials out. There's very little wasted space in this type of setup. So it works out very well. You can macro it out if you really want. I don't. It's easy enough to do. So now the other thing is if you have your main floor, this whole single floor will handle a 200 dwarf fortress. The whole thing, everything you could possibly need. If you needed just a little extra space, you can then dig down 1 level. And that's where I put my crypts and things like that. So with that, the general idea of that, let's kind of go through each of the different areas and how they're put together. Now, when we come out of our defense setup, shall we say, we always end up with this, where our trade depot is. And you'll notice if I put the cursor right there and I go shift up, it's roughly 1 of those shift blocks of space above it. You can make it a little bit taller, a little bit shorter, wherever you put your depot, for some stockpiles. And those stockpiles are all set to auto trade. I think this one here is like toys and crafts. And then I have 1 craft shop. And this craft shop, it's just a guy to get rid of the bones for a little extra spending cash. You could also move it and put it somewhere else for decorating and things like that. But it's just a way to consume some of the hair and teeth and bone and shells and stuff like that early on and not have to carry it very far. So all of the refuse that's usable for crafting just goes in this tiny little stockpile right here. And that's all that this guy does. He makes totems, and that's his entire existence. And it makes for a short trip. This pile down here, this is my primary export, which is just toys, rock toys. It's not going to make you a millionaire, but it helps get rid of the stone. As we move away from that, we come through this little trap hallway, which you could take that wall out. You don't have to. It's just a design thing I did. This room was originally going to be the barracks, and then I realized that it was a pain in the ass to build a cage, hook up a lever, pull the lever, pop a guy out. Tried to do mass pitting. Mass pitting didn't work very well. Apparently it's kind of broke now. So I just station all of my military guys in there and then do a mass pit, and half of them don't go down the pit, and they kill them anyway. And there's just a staircase right back up. It's not like I'm dropping them down to kill them. It's just to give me a delay so my normal dwarf can just walk away. There's a bridge there if I need to seal it up for emergencies. So we move towards, I suppose is the west. These little bedrooms are linked to the tavern, which is right over here. That tavern, that's for guests. It's a new mechanic that came in, and that's where the rented rooms are. The reason I put them there is because they're expendable. All right, if something were to somehow get past my defenses, I'd rather have them spend a few seconds slaughtering all of the guests rather than killing my dwarves. But as we move to the left, and this is just leftover space, I decided to stockpile my arrows, well, bolts technically, empty cages, and then there's one stockpile for each type of armor and weapon. So you have weapons, body armor, helm, legs, arms, feet, shields, and then quivers and water skins and things like that. And then each of those is a barracks storehouse for each of the military squads that I maintain. And the point, I guess, of this, there was a fix, and I don't know if even it works anymore, where they would actually store their gear on the armor stands and the weapon stand. I don't know if that fix works anymore, but I guess they use chests now. But it's just more of a stylistic thing. It made sense to have like a military barracks there. Optional, again, however you use the space is however you use the space. Moving up here, again, these are all, again, those little shift blocks. And to differentiate noble bedrooms from like a guild house or something like that, I just kind of make a little bedroom. Just a stylistic thing. But what I do tend to do is for like barons and nobles is I give them their own office in their own bedroom. It makes managing a little easier. It's easier to spread the wealth for, like a fine decorated furniture and stuff like that. You take a little bit of a hit by sharing the room, but nothing that really matters in the end. So, and worst case scenario, if I want to get rid of the noble, I can lock the door and starve him to death. So, that's a thing. The bedrooms are pretty stock, and I think people have been using this layout for, well, actually probably close to a decade now. But again, they're all the same shift blocks. Here is a museum with the new display stands where I put my artifacts, threw some statues in there, whatever. We'll get to why that guy is standing by the door. Here's a library, another one of those new locations. I threw a bunch of bookcases in there. People read. People tend to try to steal things. That's why there's a guard out here. I'll explain that later. And then workshops. And I use basically what they now call as quantum stockpiling, which is you have one pile, you build a track stop that dumps to the south, and you have a hauling route that takes from here, gives to there. It's a great way to keep things very compact. The more stockpiles you have, the more waypoints and pathing tend to happen, so you take a huge frame rate hit by having really big stockpiles. You're better off doing the quantum stockpiling and be done with it. Moving along, we have our barracks, and again, some more noble rooms, and then we have the new temples, and you get cults and groups or whatever. There's a offering. That's how I can differentiate, say, a temple from down here, which is the guild houses, which I just slap a crap ton of statues. It's not actually there to pad the value. The reason I do that is it keeps statues out of my stockpile, and then if I want to decorate one, I just unbuild it, and then they'll take it to that stockpile. So that's one way you can manage your statues, because I pay attention to what the statue is and I try to put them where it's kind of appropriate, which will bring me back up to this temple that I built. This is a generic, no specific deity temple. There's a well in the middle, put some musical instruments. Don't forget, when you're designating zones, you don't have to make them square. You can do a flood fill, which is what I did here. Then this is my Magnificent Seven room, and if you have never heard that term, there are basically 7 stock noble positions that you can have. You have your mayor, you've got your bookkeeper, you've got your chief medical doctor, and so on and so forth. Then there's about 7 of them, and I tend to put them in one room. I'm still waiting on, and this fortress has been around for 16 in-game years, and I'm still waiting for him to decorate my steel chairs. I have that much of a backlog. But anyway, there's a couple of offerings in there, and it's a meeting area, and everybody's happy. There's a room just to the south. That's where I'll have a queen or a king if I ever get one. There's an artifact table and an artifact chair. I haven't figured out what to do in this one. And then there's the pathway down to the crypts. And again, these statues here are actually relevant. I think it's no, I gotta use T. Yeah, view. All the statues leading to the crypt are relatively related to the dwarves or a particular death. So I do try to pay attention to that. So there's a bit of a story. So if you kind of dig around a fortress and you look at things, it kind of makes sense. I don't go overboard. I mean, I don't have that much free time, but I try. Once in a while, I'll build a temple to a specific in-game deity, and I'll put like the deity's statues in it. And that's kind of why that trick is way down here to the south again, is I'll just build all the statues, and it's easier to browse them that way. This is our decorating area, which is right here. This is another real simple basic trick. You have one stockpile for your cut gems, your uncut gems, and they'll accept from anywhere. And again, quantum stockpiling. And then I have 2 gem cutters. These gem cutters do nothing but cut. They're the workshop profile, which if you've never used that, you can go over here, hit Shift P, and it doesn't accept general work orders. If you look, maybe you can't see that. It's kind of a little bit down on the screen. I can't tell if you can see it or not, but it's at the bottom. You can hit enter and it will accept that. And then the labor restriction just allows gem cutting. These 2 are what we call the set shops. They are accepting only from the furniture stockpile here, and only from this gem pile here. And that allows me to decorate, and you only do one type at a time. So I'll go to this, for instance. I'm already out. I don't care if they duplicate with microline, which is just a real cheap rock that we use for skilling up. But you can go to add task, and let's say I do shorels, EFR, right? That's it. Then I'll come down to this one, and I'll do like, I don't know, praise. And then I'm done. I wait until they've run out of that gem, and the important thing to do is you hit T, make sure that the workshop is empty, because they'll decorate the same item over and over again with different gems. Then this stockpile here takes from these 2, and they have the decorated furniture, so it never gets back into the first stockpile, so they only get decorated once. Now, you can make this even more complicated. You can come up here to some of your spare rooms and set up like a bone shop in the exact same manner, take from that stockpile, then bone decorate it, and then dump it out to a final one, so you can make multiple passes. And if you really want to be fancy, when you're that bone stockpile, have them ship it back to the gem stockpile, and you can just keep running laps over and over again until the thing's decorated like 900 times. Kind of pointless, but hey, it's Dwarf Fortress. People do crazy things. So that's the general layout and how you can use this kind of stock build. It's a 3x3 embark, so you do have that center staircase. It doesn't have to be there, but I mean, it's convenient. It lowers the amount of travel time. We have some levers. I won't get into that. Down here I had some extra space, so I made a bunch of wells and a soap spot. I figure it's kind of like the bathroom. Oh, hold on. Sorry about that. The dog doesn't like the neighbor kid. So, anyways, where to leave off? Crap. What were we? You know, I was in the middle of something. Oh, yeah. So, the wells and stuff with the soap, I figured they can wash there. Kind of like the bathrooms, I suppose. So, that's the physical structure. Now, the kill pit here there's something very important I want to point out. It has to do with the spacing. Excuse me for a minute. Coffee. So, there's a gap on 2. There's a, if you look on the right side, there's a 2 space gap. On the other side, there's like a 4 space, 3 space, doesn't matter. Let's go down 1 level. We go down 1 level, you can see that the kill pit has a wall. There's a staircase, and there's the staircase for the goblins to come back up, because we want the enemy to come back up onto the kill bridge so they can fall right back down again. We're not trying to kill them. We're just trying to keep them in there. Let's go down 1 more. We go down 1 more, and you'll notice we have fortifications here. Everything's smoothed, but there's fortifications. Dwarves can shoot up or down. Seems obvious, but what you don't realize is if the gap is 2 and you go down a depth of 2, they can still hit stuff on the top of the bridge. So, if this gap is 2, and I want to guarantee that they can still hit things on this bridge surface, I build my fortifications on the 2nd floor down. Over here, they could technically shoot as high up as 4 Z levels because there's a 4 gap. I mean, they're going to go this, up, this, up, this, up, this, up, this. So keep that in mind as you're building your kill pit like that. And they'll still be able to hit the things on the top of the bridge, which is another chance for them to dodge, which is another chance for them to fall down. Which brings me to my pride and joy, cuddles. Yeah, I was able to capture a red dragon. I tried taming him for 10 years. That did not work. So I just built a cage in there, hooked up a lever, and then popped him out. And there's a bridge that prevents him from, harassing anybody during a non-siege. But if the siege starts, and I think I might actually, fall behind or they'll get across the bridge, I could pop that drawbridge down, he'll roast him alive. Works out well. I lost a lot of dwarves to him, though. So that's something that you can do down there. I've seen people do giant cave spiders. I like to do cave spiders up on the bridge before they even get there, because then again, that stalls them longer for my dwarves to attack them. You can do similar setups to do silk farming. One fortress I had a giant cave spider on the bottom, kind of like where Cuddles is. And then on the other side is where I put all my dogs behind a fortification. You just drop the bridge, the cave spider goes berserk, pop the bridge up, go harvest your webs, which I don't have to do, which is I'm going to get into that here in a second as I go through these kind of tips here. But that's one thing that you can do. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. There we are. I already dug this entire thing out. But yeah, I mean, that's two Z levels. I've got enough stone for the rest of the game. But let's go over some of the more tricky things. I've been playing so long, I used to do like the lava pump stacks and things like that. I don't do that anymore. I don't have the time to micromanage it. And at the point I'm at after all the years of playing, I just DF hack it. I just don't have the time. I'll go down, I'll make a big box, use the DF hack liquids, and just flood it with lava once I find it down below. Once I found it down below, it's not worth the frame rate loss. Your biggest enemy in Dwarf Fortress is always going to be your frame rate. The rest is relatively easy. So I would suggest doing that right off the bat to get rid of your trash. And that's what this little room here is. Maybe cheaty for some people. It's worth it for the frame rate. Okay, all it is, it's a refuse pile, and I dug up, you'll notice here, just so it's above ground so I don't get the purple miasma smoke. Just build a track stop here. Then I built the tracks down here and another track stop, and then I just have a loop. And what it does is it takes from this stockpile, when it's 50% full, shove it south, this dumps to the south, which dumps it into the lava. You can do this right away in the game if you want. I suggest it because of the frame rate saving, is just go into DF hack and there's a liquids command. Magma, you press P for point. It's already set to depth 7. Dig, a hole 3 down or 2 down or whatever, and then just use that as a pit for garbage disposal or do something, more fun like this. But even if you haven't found the lava yet, just set up a 1-tile lava garbage disposal. It's if you're using mods, there's a couple mods that I used to play with that had like a crematorium or an incinerator. I strongly recommend using something like that. But if you don't have a way to get rid of your garbage, the amount of crap that just accumulates kills your frame rate. So don't feel terribly bad about doing that. If you want to, try to keep it roughly legit, dig down until you hit lava naturally, and then just do a fill like this. Because if it's not perfectly 7.7 and it flows and stuff, it's just a pain in the ass for the frame rate. Water, that's pretty easy to manage, and it doesn't, it gets a little bit out of hand some days. If there's like a big party going on, a lot of people are using the well, then it kind of gets choppy, but it's relatively straightforward. And again, there's a bridge over here and some fortifications, a bridge, and then I dug it out using the channel here. So I added this grove early on before I got into the caves. This is just for harvesting fruit. And I think I've probably lost 30 dwarves just because people keep stealing their ladders. I literally built a bridge to one guy trying to save him. There's his cup still there. He died. Once you've got this outer perimeter wall done and you've got your initial defense, then the next thing I tend to build is the grand kitchen, which is down here. I've had temporary kitchens up, in the dirt area, but I move them down here. And the design philosophy I went with this is, again, it's using 2 of those 2x2 of those little pre-done squares. I just thought, think of a Denny's. So I put the kitchen and the brewery right here in the corner and slapped a bunch of tables around it, a bunch of undecorated chairs, and then I got fancy later on with, glass tables and things like that. But there's a stockpile for prepared meals. There's a stockpile for booze. I threw a couple cabinets, a few chests, mostly for decoration. And then this is a stockpile for mugs. Slapped 2 wells in there. And then I put a staircase down to store the raw food, barrels, buckets, and bins. And then this is where I stash the clothing. The reason I put the clothing under the tavern is it forces dwarves to pass through the tavern to get replacement clothes. There's a DF hack tool called Tailor. It will make your life a lot easier. As their clothes wear out, the Tailor function automatically queues up replacement clothing. So once you've got your pigtail farms going and you're processing plants, that's what will take a pigtail and turn it into string so you can weave cloth. That will hold you over. And let me go back up here real quick before I forget. These 5 farms are split between plump helmets, and that, and then there's 5 just dedicated to pigtails. That's the ratio I do. So, plump helmets, usually 2 plump helmets, 1 rock nut, 1 quarry bush, 1 dimple cup, and then 5 pigtails. And that, you'll be swimming in cloth until you're old and gray. So that's kind of the generals. I threw a prison down here. There's a tomb. I'm still digging out stuff. I got a bunch of tombs that I'll have up there as well. One of these is the pet cemetery. This guy over here, he's dedicated just to pets. There's some mixed in there somewhere. Don't overthink it. It's just a game. Relax. You'll go through 100 of them. So that's the general. And again, the layout is enough that if you want to restructure part of it, you can. You can build walls. You can redo it however you like. So it allows a lot of flexibility, but there was virtually no wasted stone. And by doing this in this particular setup, all these walls, you can't engrave constructed walls. You can engrave smooth walls. I could literally engrave this entire fortress floor. Everything from corner to corner, all engravements. And it's hard to see with this particular pack, but the entire tavern is engraved and the entire temple is engraved. So those two little boxes right there are completely engraved. So it's an easy way to develop a lot of wealth very quickly. Now, going to some more advanced tutorials here. A couple things. One, people underutilize burrows. Burrows are your friend. And the first and most important one you're ever going to have is the home burrow. And you'll notice the entire defensive area is excluded. So I can keep all of my peasants and all of the regular Joes in the home burrow and the fortress will function perfectly. It goes up into the dirt area. It goes up in that box. So whenever there's a danger, I can just herd them all in. They can farm, they can drink, they can do all the things they can do except go outside. So that comes in very handy. And it's very manageable. But there's a lot of other ones. This is the one thing that people have trouble with when they first start out is how to get archers to position properly. They try to use station commands. A station command is that shift block area, that 11 by 11 centered in the middle. They can go anywhere inside that box when you use a station command. What you'd use is burrows. And you'll notice here on that second floor, I have the archer pit burrows. Just one by one, right against the fortifications, and that's where they'll stand. And what you can do is you can set up schedules so there's one or two guys always standing, defending that burrow. And then they'll just rotate out. And it reduces their stress and all sorts of fun stuff. The second one I've got is the gate guard. Yeah, right up there, right at the top of that intersection. So if anything crazy happens, I got a couple guys stationed there in case they make it past the door. There's the grove, which is way back up here. That's for auto chopping. Early on, I don't really use it that much anymore now that I'm in the caves. But if you've got DF hack and you're using like the lazy new pack, there's an auto chop function, so they'll chop in that area, and that's why I originally walled that off, is just to have some extra access to wood. The tavern is another one. Why? Because in my schedules, I actually have some of my military squad always stationed in the tavern. Why? Fucking were creatures. Oh my god. Every damn time. It's one of the visitors, turns into a were creature, starts biting people, and it's an absolute disaster. So I've learned to have 2 to 4 guys just chilling in there. Comes in handy. The waypoint area that I call the food court, which I have deleted right now, is just a direct path from the trade depot down to the food storage area. So what I can do is if I really want to unload a trade depot fast, and it's usually food, meat and stuff like that, I can put all the peasants into the food court, and the only thing they can really do is either eat, drink, or haul shit. So it's a great way to use burrows to force labor into certain areas. So if you need to get something done really fast, that's what you can do. And I use the food court for other things. For instance, if there's a big siege and that kill pit is just riddled with bodies, what I can do is I can assign all of my haulers. I'll set up the food court to just cover the trash pit all the way down to that kill pit, and I just force everybody into that burrow, and all they ever can do is just haul or sleep on the floor. So don't forget just how powerful burrows can be for controlling people's movements and what they can do. The slaughter pit, that's where I station my military to guard if I'm going to do a mass pitting, because I know the mass pitting's broken. So again, if you do a station order, they could be on the other side of the wall. They could be anywhere within that 11 by 11 block area. When you use burrows, they stay in the burrow, very nice and neat, which also means that I can close the bridge if things get out of hand and not send a dwarf flying across the room at 800 miles an hour. So that's another good use for them. Cave lumber. I'm going to get to this one a little bit later. This is the big secret thing, but that's the entire caverns. All the cavern layers, they're all just called cave lumber, and I'll explain why it's called that a little bit later. But another trick that people don't realize, I have that museum right up here, right? Well, there are two burrows on each side of the door. Vault north, vault south. That's how you get two guys to stand on either side of a door. Is you assign somebody to defend that burrow, just one guy, and then you assign another guy to defend that burrow, just one guy, and next thing you know, you got two guys standing by the door. I don't have them full time. You can have like 4 or 5 squads all tied to that same thing, and they'll just kind of pile up on each other. There is one catch to that. If the two people guarding each side of the door are close friends, they'll actually just walk over each other and talk. Weird, but it is. There's a burrow for the central staircase, and it covers that lever right there, which is for closing the bridge. Again, if I need to force somebody there, I can do that, but I have a lot of my trainees. I have 2 to 4 guys just mulling around the central staircase. Why? Fucking were creatures. It's also handy for those thieves, not the kobolds, but the keats, the birds that tend to fly down or fly around. Having a couple guards right by your main staircase, you tend to catch them. So that's a couple of the tips for the underutilized burrow. Now, military. Military is always this weird mystery, and it really isn't that hard. But the overall management of it can be tricky. So I have a couple suggestions and strategies on how to go about that. This is a little bit later. You'll end up with a captain of the guards. He's the guy that arrests people, interrogates people. You can build a uniform for him with like a training sword so it doesn't actually kill anybody. I got enough people and enough spares. I don't really care. But one of the things that I tend to do with the military is the officer of the watch. It's where I throw my nobles. And the reason I do that, they don't really do anything. Again, the captain of the guard is the head of it. The reason I do that is because it forces them to wear armor. So if something breaks out, it's a lot better to have your baron or your bookkeeper or something wearing full armor. And occasionally he'll go up and train with everybody else. But you might as well. And it seems to work. And then I have them do some menial tasks like guard the museum. I then usually run 2 to 4 depending on how rough the game is going. But I'll usually have archer defense, which is full-time archers. Then I have the archer reserve, which is just the second squad. It just sounded better to say the reserves. And those are the 2 groups that I have really manning that kill pit. Then I have the intercept squad. And that's also, some people call it the brood squad. That's your melee guys, full armor. They're in steel or whatever I can spare. And they go in and they smash things and things like that. I'll usually have, not in this fortress is pretty laid back, but I'll usually have 2 of them. One of them with a mix of weapons like spears, whips. Silver whips, by the way, are awesome. I don't know why, but they're really good. Swords, battle axes, things like that. And then I'll have one that's just all hammers. And silver warhammers are awesome. But silver warhammers are really, really effective at killing people without lopping a bunch of arms off. And that comes in handy against things like elves. Because if they hit like my serrated glass, I got 50 body parts all over the place. That pisses the hell off of the haulers. It takes forever to clear out the pit. So if I know that I'm dealing with elves or something like that and I need to chase them down or something, I'll send the guys with warhammers. It's less mess. Then, and this is where we're going to start getting into the super tip here, the trainees are in many ways like the intercept squad, except it's all my haulers, janitors who carry refuse and do burials, and things like entertainers. And eventually, if I lose an archer or if I lose somebody in the intercept squad, I'll promote them out. But that gets them training. But there's a trick to this, and this is the big trick that's coming up here. But I want to get down to this next squad because then it will make sense. I have a squad called the Choppers. They're all my lumberjacks, 10 of them. Why would I build a military squad out of lumberjacks, you say? Here's the thing that people overlook. So you breach the cave. A lot of cannon fodder down there, crundles and troglodytes and stuff like that. But it's also a burrow set for auto chopping. So those lumberjacks go down in the cave all on their own, chop a tree down, and they're the only ones that have wood hauling enabled. So by default, the choppas are going down there, and anytime they see a crundle or a troglodyte or anything that looks even remotely killable, they kill it. And not only that, they seem to get skill from chopping trees too. I think out of the last 5 mega beasts and forgotten beasts that have come along, I think they were all one-shotted by my lumberjacks. Yeah. Well, guess who else does that? All my haulers. That's why they're in military squads and they're in the trainee corps. It's because then they're armed and they're armored. And they go down and they might pick up a dead body or pick up an item or recover the wounded. But they're also going down there periodically. And if I want, I can turn wood hauling on them as well. But what I do is everybody that's in the military, with the exception of the officer of the watch, they all have weaving. Here's the big secret on this. Weaving is the skill necessary to gather webs. Nobody has that skill turned on except people in the military. So what happens in the fortress when you have this kind of a setup, when you have your lumberjacks, when you have your weaving on your military, they just go down into the cave all on their own. I don't think I've had a crundle come up into my fortress. It's wide open to the caves. They never make it because there's so much traffic of the lumberjacks going down, auto clearing out the caves, and by the time they get to one end of the cave, the other end's already regrown, so it's never going to stop. So they're always going down, bringing wood back, chopping more wood. Somebody's going to gather webs. And it's just free EXP for your troops. None of this danger room crap or any of that stuff. One dwarf in crappy armor and a shield with a helmet is going to take out a crundle. And the skill up is ridiculous. Because there's always some crap on some floor somewhere. And all of my caves are linked together. So the very bottom third cave leads to the second cave. The second cave leads to the first cave. Then that goes up towards my fortress. So you can never go from like the third cave straight to my fortress. You actually have to wander through all of the cavern layers. And the nice thing is, if you set that bottommost cavern layer as where your lumberjacks work, they're pathing all over the place through all the other caves, keeping it very clean. Then, for refuse hauling, because only haulers have refuse hauling, the only people that can pick up corpses happen to be people that are armed. Free EXP every time. And occasionally something will crawl up and it hits a bunch of cage traps, but that's the advantage of that setup. So there's the big secret on that, is that the cave for the most part is cannon fodder. Occasionally cave alligator and blind cave ogre or something like that. That's a little more dangerous. And you lose a few once in a while. But by and large, it's a stupid amount of training for free. So that's your big mega secret right there. And then I end up here with the stuff that made it to the cave traps, which isn't very much. I mean, this fortress is... this year was in 2050 when this world started. So this fortress has been around for 19 years. And the only thing that's really gotten through is what's on the screen right now. And what the nice thing is those elk birds and those crundles you can train. And I have one guy who's set to train. He's called the Beastmaster. And he trains them, and then I have Auto Butcher turned on. I got so much crundle meat, I don't know what to do with it. But you just come down here and you have them, you hit like T, 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 and he'll train them. Oh, look, I got another crundle. Train. And then once they're trained, the funny thing is once they're trained, then they fall under the category of the Auto Butcher, and they just pull them right out of the cage and butcher them automatically. So it's low maintenance meat. I mean, you don't even need the normal, above ground pets and stuff like that. So it's very effective. It's a very nice layout. I think I've covered pretty much everything I planned on touching on. There's some other minor stuff, I suppose. But I figured that would kind of give you an overview of what I've learned and what I've picked up on the new versions of Dwarf Fortress since I've left off. And by and large, this thing is damn near unkillable. Almost to the point of boring. Not quite, but necromancers are problematic at best. And again, that's where that Silver Warhammer squad comes in, because with the blunt objects, you tend to pulp the body parts apart. So that does come in handy. But anyways, so there you are. I have no idea if this is still set to auto export to YouTube or not. I'll sort that out later, I suppose. But thanks for stopping by, and I got to get back to work here. I got some Excel stuff I got to do, and I'm putting together a presentation for working from home. I've been working from home for 15 years, so a lot of people have been asking me for advice on how to work from home. How do you deal with week 3, which is when everybody starts to go loopy usually, with coronavirus and stuff like that. You know, a lot of people are working from home for the first time. They're having trouble adapting, shall we say. So I'm working on putting something together for everybody on that. So anyways, have a great day. I'll catch you guys later, and hopefully this all worked out as planned. I'll find out here when I hit the stop streaming button, won't I? Later.